joining us on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Clay NFL, ESPN NFL Insider, also fantasy football expert. Mike, how you doing on this Saturday?
Hey, I'm doing well. Love calling in down in the AC area. You know, I'm up in Connecticut now by campus, but by the ESPN campus, of course. But grew up in Pennsylvania. I've been coming down to the Jersey Shore my entire life. I was just down there a few months ago. So, yeah, love calling in.
Well, I'm glad to have you on board. I wanted to start with the Eagles-Falcons game on Thursday. And one of the things that I've been trying to tell people for a while now, I think they're finally starting to see the light from Thursday, which is this Eagles defense may be the key to this team's success this year. We saw them get 13 quarterback hits against Matt Ryan on Thursday night. And to me, I look at this Eagles team and I say, look, I understand Carson Wentz, Nick Foles, that whole situation, but it might take some time for Carson Wentz to get back to who he was last year when he even comes back. So to me, the key for the Eagles moving forward is going to be that defense keeping them in games.
Yeah, no question about it. The Eagles have one of the best defenses in the NFL, but, to kind of touch on the Eagles offense as well, keep in mind they're playing one of the best teams in the NFL. The Falcons are very good. I mean, they were quiet in the offseason, so they didn't get a ton of attention, but they were quiet for a reason, and that's because they didn't need to be too active. They're pretty stocked up well across the board, very balanced team. So, yeah, I mean, just like we saw in the playoffs, you might struggle scoring some points against a very good team. But, yeah, it's good to see that without Alshon Jeffrey and Wentz and Timmy Jernigan, obviously, Nigel Bradham was out, to be missing those four guys, and Maragos, of course, in special teams, and still come away with a win against one of the better teams in the league. It's really impressive. But I'm with you. I mean, obviously, just loaded with talent on both sides of the football. The defense is in great shape. You'll keep an eye on corners, how well they do going forward. Should be fine. You'll get Bradham back. Maybe at midseason you get Jernigan. Barring a disastrous injury season, this should be, again, one of the league's better units.
Fletcher Cox mentioned this offseason that his next goal is to be a Defensive Player of the Year award winner. Do you think that he is on track to that kind of career trajectory, or do you think that he maybe not on that same level as a guy like an Aaron Donald?
No, I would certainly put Donald on his own level, but no one is on his level, right? That's not disrespect to Fletcher Cox, who's, probably a top 5 defensive tackle in the NFL.
Right.
He's great. He's elite, but he's also, going on 28 years old. We're probably in his peak years right now. And he's not going to win Defensive Player of the Year, I don't think. I mean, it's just impossible to do, I think, for an interior defensive lineman. It's already a push for Donald, and he is just arguably the best player in the NFL. So, listen, I don't, again, no disrespect to Cox. He's obviously an elite player at that position, but I think that's probably pushing it a bit.
Touching on the Falcons before we get to the rest of the NFL, it seems like ever since Kyle Shanahan left that Matt Ryan has just not been able to tap into the same level of ability that he was able to execute when he won the MVP and they got to the Super Bowl with Kyle Shanahan's coaching. Is there that much of a gap between Shanahan's ability as a play caller and his ability to elevate offensive players versus other types of offensive coordinators?
Well, yeah, definitely. I mean, I think Kyle Shanahan is one of the best in the business. You obviously have to give him credit for that. We'll see what he does with Jimmy Garoppolo for a full season this year. But he's had a lot of success throughout his career, not just really with quarterbacks, but offenses altogether, even running backs. You look back at the list of running backs who have had career years under him, including Alfred Morris, who he's just been reunited with, Devonta Freeman, Steve Slayton, remember that name, Carlos Hyde last year. So he's made the most out of his talent. That said, Matt Ryan played well last season. They had some struggles near the goal line. Granted, we saw that again Thursday night, but he finished 5th in total QBR. Say what you want about QBR, it's one of the probably the best stat for rating quarterbacks. He still fared very well last season, had a tremendous season. So it's easy to get caught up in recency bias. It's easy to see one game into the NFL season. We have a long way to go. It's easy to see that and see a pair of quarterbacks, a pair of offenses struggling in the first game of the year against two of the better defenses in the NFL, and it's easy to overreact to that. But you should not. Ryan's still, again, a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and I think the Eagles will be a top 10 offense in the NFL as well once they're back on the field. So, again, it's not time to panic by any means.
The Falcons' offense has always been a bit of an interesting enigma to me because you look at a guy like Julio Jones, arguably one of the three best receivers in the NFL, but when he gets 6 or more catches in a game since 2014, the Falcons are only winning about 48-49% of their games. So is that something where in certain games they're just forcing the ball too much to him and they lose their balance? Or is it in some ways that offense is just not always called the right way?
No, I don't think that's really connected. I mean, in some ways, he's going to have more catches because they're playing from behind in the second half, right? Mm-hmm. It's like that age-old quote where when a running back gets 20-plus carries, the team is, 19-1, something along the lines. Obviously, game script has its say in that, and that very well could be the case with Julio. He's one of the best receivers in the NFL. He's extremely efficient when he's throwing the football. I mean, you look at his yards per target marks throughout his career; they're always tremendous. So those throws are efficient. They're smart plays. And granted, maybe 19 targets a game isn't the right way to go. You need to get the football to other guys. But he still put up 169 yards in that game. He was very good, even though there was obviously bobbled that one, whatever. When you're targeted 19 times, you're going to have a drop here or there. You're going to bobble some passes. It's not a big deal. But I don't think that connection was the reason they failed in that game. The Eagles played extremely well defensively. Matt Ryan did not have a particularly good game. And the other weapons in the offense just didn't really make plays. Mohamed Sanu barely did anything. Calvin Ridley did not have a catch in his first NFL game. Austin Cooper was same old. Devonta Freeman got injured. You just didn't see the plays from the other game. So I don't think they necessarily went wrong forcing the ball to Julio. It's worked the past 5 seasons. He's been top 3 each of the past 4 years. The guy's just too good to not get the football to as often as you possibly can.
Mike Clay joining us on the Boardwalk on the Hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Follow him on Twitter at Mike Clay NFL. Mike, we were just talking about Kyle Shanahan earlier. I heard it inferred this week, and I don't know if I agree with this or not. I really wanted your perspective on this. I've heard some people try to imply that Doug Pederson is becoming one of the best offensive play callers in the NFL, and to me, I don't know if I'm really ready to take that step personally, because I think what makes Pederson great isn't as much the play calling, but it's his ability to put players in great situations to be successful. What is your perspective on Doug Pederson and his evolution, not just as a head coach, but as an offensive play caller?
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought a lot about that during the offseason, right? You had off-field trouble with this team. You had the suspensions with Bradham. You have the felony charge against Michael Bennett. We'll see what happens there. You have the injuries to Wentz and Jeffrey and Jernigan. And it starts piling up, and you look at this team and say, okay, they're loaded on paper, probably the best team from top to bottom in the NFL. But with all these other extenuating circumstances, with teams tending to struggle to repeat aside of New England for the Super Bowl, how do you pick them? And I kind of go back to, they can deal with some injuries. They can deal with some suspensions because you have Doug Pederson giving them an edge over most of the rest of the NFL with his decision making. You could call it play calling, you could call it personnel usage, you could call it the position you put the players in, whether it's a read option, an RPO. We hear this terminology over and over again. Going for it on fourth down. There's still many coaches across the NFL who are going to shrug that kind of thing off and just not buy into really the numbers, the probabilities. He is doing things that give them an edge every single week. And you can be a step behind a team in terms of talent and still win games because you're just playing smarter. And right now, until the rest of the league catches up, the Eagles are probably in the top 5, maybe the top 7 in terms of having that edge. And that's not going to change going forward. I don't think. I don't see why anything would change. He's going to keep going for it on fourth and designing these plays that maximize production. So, yeah, they absolutely, call it whatever you want, they absolutely have an edge because of Doug Pederson.
Where do you think Doug got that edge from? Do you think that's a byproduct of all the years he was as a backup quarterback, working with, behind a guy like a Brett Favre, behind a guy like a Dan Marino, the coaches he played under, like Don Shula and Mike Holmgren? Or do you think part of that is also because Doug just naturally has always been such a football guy that he just absorbs information so well?
Well, I think there's a couple things. I think it's the modern NFL, first of all. I mean, the Eagles have an analytics department. They have a couple people there that are obviously going to sit down with him and explain these things to him. And it's the future of the NFL. It's going to keep going this direction. It's just a matter of when these teams are going to budge on it and start using next-gen data and making smart decisions based on the best possible result, not to be scared off by, oh, man, if we punt if we go for it at the 50 instead of punting, we might lose the ball and they might get good field position. Well, if your odds of winning the game are better by going for it, you should do that every time. You can't be scared off, and Pederson obviously is not scared. And the other part of it is he comes from the Andy Reid coaching tree. I mean, Andy Reid, we know from him being in Philadelphia for so long, he's always been ahead of the curve. Say what you want about his usage of timeouts and his clock management and his struggles, winning Super Bowls, whatever. The guy was always ahead of the game, and he still is. I mean, the Chiefs the last few seasons have not exactly been overwhelming with talent, but they always get to the playoffs and win the division, and they crushed the Patriots last season. And time again, they can compete with inferior talent because you have Andy Reid designing plays that nobody else is thinking of, and they're getting copied. The surprise onside kick, just the creativity with the offense. It's unreal what he has done, and that's part of it too. I think Pederson coming from that coaching tree, playing under Reid, coaching with him, it's really taken him a long way.
Mike, every year in the NFL, we see teams that didn't make the postseason the year before that get to the postseason the next year. And I know everyone, they all want to focus on the Eagles and the Saints and the Rams. And the AFC, it's the Patriots and the Steelers and the Jags. But are there a handful of teams in each conference that you're looking at and you're saying, man, everyone's overlooking these one or two teams, and you really feel like those are the teams that are going to be the prototype worst to first this year?
Yeah, it's always tough, especially this year, because I feel like the best teams in the league got better, especially in the NFC. Last year, I expected a lot of playoff turnover. This year, it's harder to find. I think you have 6 premier teams in the NFC with Philly, Minnesota, Green Bay, New Orleans, Atlanta, and the Rams. It's going to make it tough for some sleeper teams like Chicago, San Francisco, teams like that to get into the playoffs. But the team I've been kind of pounding the door down for, and by the way, I'll say this before I mention this team and everyone shuts the radio off. Last year, I talked up the Jags, the Eagles, the Chargers. The year before, I talked up the Raiders, and it was laughed at. It was ridiculous. But something I spent a lot of time on is just studying the rosters from top to bottom. It doesn't matter what the helmet says. It matters how good the players are. Right. And the team that really is much better than people give them credit for is the Cleveland Browns. Again, and it's not. This is well before the Hard Knocks spike, and everybody, the Hard Knocks hype, whatever you want to call it. The team is pretty good. You have a decent O-line. Tyrod Taylor does not turn the ball over, and roughly half of the team's win total is determined by turnover margin. That's important. Great group of skill position players offensively. They have a good edge rusher, obviously, and Myles Garrett, one of the next superstars in the NFL. The linebackers are good. The secondary is a chance to be extremely good, especially at corner. If you just put the biases aside, focus just on roster talent. The Browns are a mid-pack team at worst. And the AFC is weak, as I mentioned. There's a chance for an 8-8 team to snag a wild card. That could be Cleveland this season. So keep an eye on them. I was on the Chargers bandwagon last year. I think they win the AFC West. So that's another team I think that takes a big step forward this year.
Let me ask you about the Chargers, because that's a team I want to pick them to win the West. I really do, but I feel like those injuries are just piling up. So you feel like the Chargers, they're going to be able to overcome all the injuries they've sustained?
Well, I'll tell you what. I liked them a lot last year. I think they were better than their record indicated from some freaky plays. They probably should have made the playoffs, considering how things played out. But you're right. I think that they are now getting the hype they deserved last season. People are picking them to win the division or have them in the playoffs. And it might be a little over the top. You're exactly right. Losing Jason Verrett again, though, they are loaded in the secondary. And obviously on the offensive side of the ball, losing Hunter Henry was big. So that does bother me a little bit that they're already being injured. Forrest Lamb's not back to 100% ready to start either. So there's certainly some holes on this roster, and I think that is enough to put them behind New England, behind Pittsburgh, very close with a team like Jacksonville with their stacked defense. But I do think they're better than the Chiefs right now. And if Pat Mahomes is a superstar and he comes out firing the first month of the season, it could be a different story, but until we see that from Mahomes, I'm gonna go a little safer here, if you will, with the Chargers.
Mike, one more for you, and appreciate your time here on 97.3 ESPN, 117 here on a Saturday. We got a lot of Giant fans in this area as well. This is the team. They got a new coaching staff. They drafted Saquon Barkley. Odell's got that new contract. Probably an underrated move was the acquisition of Ogletree, the linebacker. How do you see the Giants this year? Or do you think that they could potentially sneak into one of those wild card slots? Or do you think this team is potentially still a year away?
Yeah, I do not. I'm not on the Giants bandwagon. I talked about how stacked the NFC is right now. That's a problem. I'm not with you on Ogletree. I'm going to disagree with you there. He has not played very well the past few seasons. There's a reason that the Rams gave up on him so quickly. They signed him to a long-term extension, quickly realized their mistake, and they're actually very weak at inside linebacker right now as the roster stands, and still, dumped him off for parts. So not a good position there by any means at middle linebacker for the Giants, if you ask me. What's interesting about this team is they're very top-heavy. No question they have superstar power here with Odell Beckham. They bring in Nate Soldier, Saquon Barkley, obviously, on the defensive side of the ball at every level. Collins, Jenkins, Olivier Vernon, who's injured right now, Damon Harrison, Dalvin Tomlinson looks like a find. That's great. But who do you have after that? A massive drop-off in talent after that. Very suspect starters at other positions. The depth is a concern. And if guys like Vernon start getting injured, or we saw it with Jenkins last year, who do you turn to? It's going to be a really problematic. And again, in a stacked NFC, I don't know how you crack that top six over Atlanta and over the Packers and get past Carolina and San Fran and the Bears, who I think are a top 12 team after getting Khalil Mack. It's going to be trouble. And I do think they're at least a year away.
Give him a follow on Twitter at Mike Clay NFL. All kinds of great insights on the NFL as well as fantasy football. Check out all of his articles that he posts on his Twitter feed at ESPN.com. Mike, appreciate your time here on a Saturday. A lot of great insights. I hope to have you on again in the future.
All right, sounds great. Let's do it.